If the forest is dense, then the numbers are real. If the numbers are real, then the feeling is squeezed. If the feeling is squeezed, then the feeling is crushed. If the feeling is crushed, then the feeling is smothered. If the feeling is smothered, it touches no one. If it touches no one, there's no one feeling. We are trying to make sense of a feeling. Making sense of a feeling is like building a boat from water. Feeling is a field. It is uneven. None of its points is like any other. A field of what? A field of being a field. A field of what? A field of being a field. Or feeling is field work, for it involves an other. When it does not involve an other, it is called fooling. Even when it does involve another, it may still be called fooling, for it never fully involves another. To outfool fooling, we think of feeling as feeling about. Feeling about means trying to touch the object of your feeling. It is often done in the dark. We feel about when we cannot see and grasp. How do we feel about each other? We feel for each other. We feel for each other in the dark. We feel for each other in the dark, trying to make sense of the feeling. And the last one, thank you very much for being here. The last one is, it's Germlish, German English, but it's actually based on a line in Mandelstam where he says that часто пишется казнь, sometimes you write execution, but you read song. Пишется казнь, читается песнь. And I was reading it, I was thinking about this line. I was like, well, they're similar in Russian, but they're much more similar in German, right? Because Lied is song and Leid is suffering. And, you're just reversing two letters. Das Lied hat gelogen, the song lied. Sorrow was the issue. Der Ausgang war Leid. Was it the sorrow of love? Was es das Leid der Liebe? The sorrow of love burdens not only the soul, but also the body. Das Leid der Liebe belastet nicht nur die Seele, sondern auch den Leib. The soul is silly. Die Seele is dumm. It is silly because it does not know how to speak. Sie ist dumm, weil sie nicht sprechen kann. It is language that says things in its name. Es ist die Sprache, die Sachen in ihrem Namen sagt. Actually, it says words, not things. Eigentlich sagt sie Wörter, nicht Sachen. Deutsch ist eine deutliche Sprache. The German language is limpid. Sie ist bedeutungsvoll. German is full of meaning. The meaning of German in English is closely related. Englisch heißt Englisch, weil es eng mit Deutsch verwandt ist. Many words in German look like many other words in German. Viele Wörter auf Deutsch ähneln vielen anderen Wörtern auf Deutsch. This endows German with a light air of duplicity. Das verleiht dem Deutschen einen leichten Touch der Doppelzüngigkeit. Often you write das Leid, but read das Lied. Thank you very much.
Eugene, I think since we have so little time, we should ask the audience about their questions and save my questions for you for later. I'm sure that the audience has things to ask. If I'm wrong, then I can ask some questions. But there must be some questions out there.
Hello? Oh,
And we also have a mic, yeah, if anyone wants to pose any questions to Eugene. I mean, that was just so wonderful. I'll start with, oh, wait, is that a question right there? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, that was really wonderful. I wonder if you could talk about your like textual process for choosing your format or working with the words on the page.
It's different for different pieces. Almost always, not almost always, always. It starts when a line appears in my head, and then I just start working it until some other line appears. Even when I incorporate other texts, or when I guess do research, it's never entirely rational. I think if you plan, it's just not going to come out well. I mean, for me anyway. And the basic rules are contrast, sharp montage. And then I rewrite obsessively. And a sonnet takes me a month. I mean, I just work and work and work and work. That's the process. It's not a very glorious process. Yeah.
Olga has a question.
Oops, sorry. Hi, thank you for the reading. It was great. I have a question about relation to the tradition. Do you feel that your work is some kind of continuation of Russian avant-garde, like Vedinsky, or it's still different and has much more influence than just the works of your translations?
Thank you for the question, but it's a very complicated question. We were talking a bit in Charles's class about this yesterday. I mean, I grew up here, here in New York. I mean, I came to New York when I was 11, but I grew up reading Russian poetry. I read some American stuff, some English language stuff in high school, but I read a lot of Russian stuff. And in that sense, I kind of oscillate between the two traditions, but they're very different traditions. And so an Italian friend of mine read my translations of Vedinsky, and he was like, "Oh, I know where you got it. It sounds just like you." And I was like, "Wait, these are my translations. What do you mean?" But in a certain sense, what's going on is that the BDU were important to me, and I think they're in general important now, because to me, as a second language speaker, what they do with the language, the way they alienate it, even though their reasons are very different, it has to do with the crash of the crash of the avant-garde, but also with the fact that they're surrounded by Soviet speak. At the same time, their alienation of language and makes great intuitive sense. It's not a poetry of wholeness. It's a poetry of things broken apart, right? And in that sense, they relate to people like Tsalan. And if they relate to Mandelstam, they relate to Mandelstam as somebody like Tsalan reads him, and certainly not like somebody like Nadezhda Mandelstam reads him, right? Which is read polemically against, the Soviet fake embrace of the avant-garde. So in that sense, I do. The Russian tradition is enormously important to me, but I think the most important thing for me is this difference between the traditions. The fact that what makes sense in one doesn't make sense in the other. So.
I see 3 hands, so start at the back and move forward.
Hi. So in the same venue, your book was just translated into Russian by Zapol. How was it working with a Russian translator, knowing, being a native speaker, well, native in quotes, I guess, yourself?
Well, this was a very special translation situation because the translator was working in my kitchen. So, I mean, we were working together. I needed, I think Zappa did a great job. I think he's a great translator. I think it was his first time really working from English because normally he works from Latvian, yeah? But for me, I couldn't have done it myself in a way because I'm too close to the poems.
But he couldn't have done it either.
Yeah,
without you,
yeah.
right? Because his English is not good enough.
Well, translation, there's a lot to be said for dialogue in translation, even in translation of poetry.
Julia has a question, then Ron.
So this kind of segues off of the other 2 questions about native tongue and mother tongue, and I loved the exchange between the pirate and the parrot, and I wonder where you fit in terms of the music of the poems. Do you find yourself thinking sometimes in Russian, sometimes in English, and how kind of the complicated relationship within language, especially when you bring in the German too?
The music of the poems is maybe the most in-between thing about the poems. Because in terms of musicality, for me, the most important experience is that of going from, let's say, reading Mandelstam in Russian and then trying to translate that into English. So there's this incredible kind of deflation and othering that happens. So there's that kind, I don't know, breaking of the vessels. There's that kind of breaking of the vessels that happens. So that for me is when like the music is there, but you hear it in snatches, and you're not sure that you hear it. Yeah.
Ron had a question right here.
Actually, it might be the same question. There are parts in the book where you switch from English to Cyrillic and back again. Sometimes those are homophonic to American ears, like Boatman or Jack Spicer, and they're noted along the side. But there's also this sort of click that occurs in seeing that language made alien right in front of your eyes. And then there are other portions, and you read a little bit of it, where that, not exactly but translucency doesn't occur, and where it's more opaque. And somebody whose knowledge of Russian was that 30 years ago, I could read a street sign. That's completely other in that regard. And I'm curious as to what you're thinking as you're going through that process of putting that on the page and your rationales.
I want to thank you for the question. I want to add to this as somebody who actually can read the Russian, that the Russian is purposefully written in such a way as to make it almost impossible to read, even if you read Russian. Because like the thing that I read with the song in the middle of the Abordage poem, the point of the song is the word "попугай," which is used, which means parrot, right? It comes from the German. But it's the same linguistic form. You can read that linguistic form as an imperative of the verb for to scare for a little while. So, and I tried to make it grammatically so you can figure out which to choose. So, I mean, the point is the materiality. One of my favorite poems ever is, you know, the Man Ray poem where everything is crossed out? So to give that, and this Cyrillic is great for that. You know, when the reader can't, you know, is not really a fluent Russian speaker. It gives this blotch, fuzz, and I like that. So, and the other thing about using two languages side by side and not having them say the same thing is it's interesting, and because you're creating a work that's gonna, I mean, I know that all poems, all works, all trees, all bees are different to different onlookers, but you're kind of capitalizing on that fact. And it's an interesting thing to do because you create kind of a new kind of polyphony, a semantic polyphony consciously, that this will work for some people, but for other people, they'll hear something else.
Can I one of my questions, which I already asked you, but I think this like maybe phrases it in a different way, is really about, you were talking just now about alienated language and non-alienated language, and putting that together with the experience of being a non-native speaker or writing in a language which is, you know, you're writing now in German, which you told me earlier you don't actually feel that you're a confident speaker of German. Even though
I'm not even a non-confident speaker of German.
But even though it's a family language for you now,
right.
that you speak to your children in. But I wanted to come back to this huge distance between the pirate and the feeling lyrics. And as I said, just like, and anyone who's like followed Eugene's career, in his early chapbooks, he was more of a lyric poet. And then the middle of his career and his books have been predominantly writing at a greater distance from the language, like the pirate, in something where the language is crafted, nearly always in quotes, very often spoken by a character who is not Eugene. Yeah. And now suddenly we get these extraordinary poems which are truly lyric. I mean, it's you, it's your voice. And I wanted to know, what happened to return you to that, and what it feels like to use alienated language, a language that's not your own, but in your own voice, as opposed to in someone other, like when you're just quoting someone's other language, that's another language. But now it's you speaking German. So.
Well, okay, so in a way, so on a very simple level, when I finished this book, which in lots of ways is anti-poetic. I was just like, okay, now I'm going to write some poetry. This is, now is really the right time, and I'm going to do the most kind of cliched poetry possible, which is, in the Western tradition, that's the love sonnet. So, so that's kind of the easy answer. But then it's very scary to speak as yourself, and it's practically impossible because the language that we speak is, it's a bunch of commodities. Somebody's selling stuff to us, and we're just, helping somebody else sell stuff to us. So the question is how to speak to yourself, or how to speak as yourself, using words that are yours, not yours at all, in such a way that something actually comes through, in such a way that you're not just performing according to scripts, according to genres. And you know, the only I guess the pirate looks at language from the side, but the feeling sonnets really look at language from the side, right? I mean, they're about how the word feeling, you know, means this, but it also means this, right? They're about they're about how they're the same words, the same word shapes, but they have different meanings. And then so in a way, it's really, I'm speaking, but it's very hard to speak, and I'm watching myself speak. And maybe psychologically, it came from my failure to learn German, in a way also because I lived in Berlin, I live in Berlin, I didn't have a job in Berlin, so I was working in Paris, and basically I would like fly between home where, you know, the kids are speaking mostly in German, you know, where I wouldn't understand a lot. And then I would fly in and then have to go to a faculty meeting, which is in French, you know, which I understood a bit better, in fact, better. But not when I got off the plane, right? There would be like 2 days when I just couldn't understand anything around me. And then I would have a few more days when like I could understand it, but then I got back on the plane. So, in a certain sense, that's what I'm trying to do to English in the feeling sonnet.
If there's a last question, I think we have time for it, but then we probably have to close down because I see people grabbing their coats. Right over here.
Listening to you read your poems reminds me of a couple of specific things. Shel Silverstein and Andrew Bird, the musician. Do you listen to Andrew Bird's music? Both from Chicago, both kind of quintessentially American people. And yet they've got the sort of playfulness with language that you've got, which you kind of describe as a sort of multilingual, kind of interlingual thing. Do you know of a way to describe how someone who's kind of American and very attached to just English might feel about? How would they describe that kind of playfulness that they bring to language that seems so similar to yours?
I mean, some of it has to do with, some of it does have to do with just looking at words as objects that have all these different possibilities, and you can, you know, arrange them this way and that way, right? So on the one hand, you're speaking, but on the other hand, you're doing these cool combinations. But then, you know, in American English, there's lots of other languages, right? English in general is a very mixed language, right? Thanks to the Normans, thanks to Latin, thanks to the Vikings, thanks to, you know, the empire, blah, blah, blah. There's just so much stuff in it. American English in particular is full of other languages, full of immigrant languages, full of, you know, they're indigenous words. They're all just all sort, you know, it's, the thing with language is that if you knock on a word long enough, you'll wind up in another language. I mean, so.
All right, I think we're going to close down, but before we do, I just want to remind you that there were, at the beginning of this at least, a number of Eugene's books for sale. I think they still are. And thank you once again for coming.
Thank you very much.